Welcome back to Weekly Briefing. Joining me in studio is John Schweppe, Director of Policy and Affairs at the American Principles Project. Nicole Neely, the President of Parents Defending Education. And Derrick Hollie, member of Project 21 and President of Reaching America. This week, President Biden proposed a radical new tax on American households worth more than $100 million. Biden's billionaire minimum income tax would impose a 20% tax on income and liquidated assets, which would include stocks and bonds. Here is Biden's rationale.
If you make $1 billion, great. Just pay your fair share. Pay a little bit. A firefighter and a teacher pay more than double the tax rate that a billionaire pays. That's not right. That's not fair.
John, Biden says this is reserved only for the upper echelons of society. Is this entirely correct?
Biden doesn't understand the stock market. So basically, the problem here is when you're talking about these liquid assets and unrealized gains, that's how you basically disincentivize long-term investment. And so the stock market is relatively stable. It helps the economy long-term. It allows people to invest and to innovate and do all these things. And when you do that, you kind of do this GameStopification of the economy where I'm just as incentivized to day trade as I would be to do long-term investments. It's crazy. It's really bad for the economy long-term, and it's going to be dangerous for the economy.
Well, so this is essentially a wealth tax. This is the first of its kind that would be imposed on a very, very specific and small demographic. This does have a chilling effect, doesn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, Econ 101, right? You tax the things you want less of, and you incentivize and you pay for the things you want more of. We want fewer rich people investing in businesses in America. That, to me, seems like a very stupid thing. But, I mean, I'm not running the White House Econ department.
Well, so here's something interesting. A report revealed that had this tax been in place in 2021, Elon Musk would have had to pay about $24 billion in taxes. And granted, he makes a lot of money, and that may not be a huge dent in his overall wealth, but still, if the government starts taxing at that scale, I mean, don't these guys have ways to move their money elsewhere?
Yeah, absolutely. And also, it's going to have other downstream effects. So $24 billion, how is Elon going to pay for that? He's going to sell his Tesla stock, and that's going to cause Tesla's stock to go down in value. A lot of people are going to lose money across the economy. So it's not just, we're getting Elon because he's rich. It's actually affecting all sorts of things. And, if you're somebody who's interested in electric vehicles, maybe a lot of conservatives aren't, but you want to see Tesla succeed. And this is actually the government punishing Tesla for their success.
So, on a related note, Biden's budget featured big themes: environmental justice and equity. The proposed budget would allocate about $1.5 billion to the EPA's environmental justice efforts. The White House says this will advance racial equity. The budget would also devote $11 billion to international climate finance, while allocating $3 billion in spending said to advance global gender equity. Derrick, what does this mean?
Chanel, I've had the opportunity to go before Congress 5 times to get witness testimony on energy-related issues, particularly energy poverty, which occurs when individuals and families are unable to afford basic heating, electric, and now gas needs. This plan that he's proposing from the EPA does nothing to impact those individuals who are really struggling right now. In fact, when you talk about environmental justice, which is the key word coming out of Washington, D.C., all it is it's a ploy to shut down the oil and gas industry. And these burdensome regulations that are being proposed on the oil and gas industry will do nothing more than drive up the cost of energy for those who they claim to protect, which are the poor, minorities, and those kind of people. And it has been proven. We can look at what's happening right now with the policies that the Biden administration has put in place and how it's impacting the most vulnerable populations in this country right now, which are low-income, minority, senior citizens, and rural populations, the same people that they claim to protect with this plan.
So that's interesting. I mean, when we say environmental justice, it's such a vague term. You don't really understand what it means. But you're saying that there is such a thing as environmental justice and injustice.
There's such a thing as they've defined it, environmental justice. What we should be saying is an environmental injustice compared to what they're really doing right now with these policies, because it's an injustice right now that your electric bill has more than doubled over the last couple of months. It's an injustice that gas prices are up $1.30 from where they were last year. It's an injustice, again, the natural gas is up 54% compared to where it was last year, and this is directly related to the policies that are coming out of this Biden administration.
Now, I take it you've read this budget, you've read the proposal, and in it there's so much mention of equity. I think it's mentioned over 100 times. How is that playing into the overall strategy here? How does that even translate into actual policy?
It does not, but what it does, it sounds good. And so Americans, we are so busy from day to day. We have so many things going on in our lives, and so all we hear are sound bites. And so the White House and the Democrats, they know that that's what the focus of America right now is, a soundbite. And so if you hear racial justice, equality, that kind of, oh, well, this party's for me. But it's all a ploy. And it's full of false hopes and unrealistic outcomes, what his plan is.
And I'll tell you, you mentioned the $11 billion in international climate stuff. That's Biden giving away $11 billion to his buddies overseas. Meanwhile, working families are struggling with these energy costs, and he's doing nothing to help alleviate those costs. So, I think it's frankly insulting.
Is there any way to track where this money actually goes when it goes overseas?
As far as I've been able to see, the same thing with the Paris Climate Agreement. That was one of the reason why President Trump pulled us out of there, because there was no oversight of that money. In the United States, we were due another $1 billion, and none of the other countries even saw where the money was going, and there was completely no oversight. So where does this money go after you give away $13 billion to another country?
What's interesting about the Paris Climate Accords is that when President Trump pulled out, he had all these justifications for doing so, and the left naturally lost their minds.
Sure.
It was the end of the world. And yet, within a few years, we've actually exceeded some of the requirements that Paris Climate Accord called for on our own.
On our own, and other countries that were involved haven't even started to work towards those goals that were put in place with this agreement. And again, when he pulled us out, there was no oversight over the money, of the funding that was going there, and additionally, the other countries had failed significantly in terms of what they were supposed to do and with the requirements of the Paris Agreement. So we, as John just said, we look like idiots right now if we would give away $13 billion to another country.
So speaking of hopping topics now, Disney Corporation has gone fully woke. The company vowed to fight to repeal House Bill 1557. The media has inaccurately labeled this bill as the Don't Say Gay bill. In addition, Disney corporate president Carrie Burke pledged to incorporate more gay lead characters in the company's content.
I'm here as a mother of two queer children, actually, one transgender child and one pansexual child. One of our execs stood up and said, we only have a handful of queer leads in our content. And I went, what? That can't be true. And I realized, oh, it actually is true. We have many, many, many LGBTQIA characters in our stories, and yet we don't have enough leads.
Nikki, that video has now almost 2 million views, and I'm unclear as to whether that was actually supposed to be public or not, but Disney is siding with radical activists here, and they are not siding with parents per se. Is there a scenario where Disney backs down?
It's hard to say. I mean, I loved the soundbite from Governor DeSantis last night. He said if this was the Don't Say Uyghur bill, Disney would be all in. I mean, come on. But let's think about what 1557 actually does. It prohibits the instruction, actual classroom teaching of sex and gender topics, kindergarten through 3rd grade. Those are 5-year-olds to 8-year-olds. And so the fact that this is a hill that Disney wants to die on, that they really strongly believe that children who do not know how to read or write, they don't know the birds and the bees, that's the kind of programming that children should have is appalling. And Disney used to be a family-friendly company. And so I was talking to some friends at Moms for Liberty, and they said, you know, this should be a wake-up call for families to ditch Disney. They do not have our interests at heart anymore. This has gone straight political and woke.
You would think that with the election in Virginia, the governor's race, the fight that we watched happen between parents and those who wanted to override the parents, that the left would have learned from this. They would have learned from the lesson of Virginia, and they would not have made such a public spectacle of it in a state like Florida. You would think that was the case.
You would think so. And it's interesting because polling about the actual Florida bill, when people know what it is, because as you alluded to, it has been so mischaracterized by the media, broad majorities of Democrats as well as Republicans are in favor of this. The fact that we are injecting this kind of radical curriculum into our schools behind closed doors is appalling. Most parents have no idea and didn't have any idea until COVID came out what their children were actually learning or not learning on a daily basis. And so I think this is why we've seen this parental revolution spring up over the past 2 years, and people are not backing down because last year it was a lot of racial topics, this year it is a lot of gender topics. And while there are a few kind of senior statesmen in the Democratic Party, like David Axelrod saying this is down this path destruction lies, you have the Squad and people like that saying, no, we need to double down on this. We need to go even harder on this. And to that I say, yeah, bring it. I would love to see that. You know, I welcome your insanity.
It was amazing that David Axelrod even is not siding with them here. When we come back from the break, our panelists discuss the liberal media suddenly covering Hunter Biden's laptop. Are they preparing for another scandal? Are they bracing for something else entirely? All this and more when we return.